Alright, so this is the showcase number 2, Technology for Evaluation. And just a little reminder, the original lesson plan that I based this on was a narrative writing English language arts lesson for the 3rd grade. And the technology used in it was Storybird, and it was provided by Common Sense, which is an online resource for educators. And it includes a lot of teacher-made lesson plans and resources for online citizenship. And then all of the lesson plans include some type of technology in them. And the learning goals is that the students will be able to identify all the elements of a narrative story and then write their own story using all the elements. So here's a choice board. It has 9 different activities or assessments that students can do that will show that they learned from the original lesson. So the first one, the students will write a narrative story using a pre-made worksheet, including all the elements of a narrative story. How I am envisioning this is that there's the elements of a narrative story, and then the students will define those elements, and then there will be like a little box at the bottom where the students will write their own little short story. And then the second one, students will use Kahoot to define the elements of a narrative story. Kahoot is basically an online quiz resource. A lot of students like it because it's very easy. You don't have to do basically anything to set it up. You just type in a code and then make your username. And it's super fun, fast-paced, and a lot of students like it. The third one, students will partner up and read a story, then identify all the elements of a narrative story, if they are there or not, and then grade the story based on element usage. So this would just be, they'd be in partners, and then they would get a printout of a narrative story. All the partner pairs would have a different story. And the elements of a narrative story won't necessarily be in there, but it's their job to figure out if it is in there and then to point them out and then grade that story based on the element usage. Right? And then the fourth one, students will use Spiral to take an interactive quiz on narrative writing. Spiral is another online quiz resource. It's a little different because it does have so many different resources to choose from. You can watch a video, students could watch a video on narrative writing, and then there would be questions embedded in that video that they would have to answer, and they also have that feature for a slide deck as well. So if a student was on slides, they would get to a certain slide and then a question would come up and they would answer that. And then it also has the same kind of questioning that Kahoot does, where it's a fast-paced, you get your answer graded right after the question's over. And there's a leaderboard. All right, the fifth one, students will partner up and share a piece of paper. Each student will take turns writing for 1 minute, including all the elements of a narrative story. So this one would be just one student would start writing and just keep those elements in mind while they're writing. And then a timer would go off and they'd switch to the next person. And then it's kind of fun because they would create this kind of pieced together story that they were both writing. And they don't know what the other person is writing until they get that paper back and read it. Right, and then the sixth one, students will be randomly assigned a topic and will have 15 minutes to write a narrative story. This one's kind of get a topic and then you think of it quick and then you write it, but they also have to keep in mind those narrative story elements. So that would show that they are able to think quickly and keep those elements in mind. Seventh one, students will create a narrative story comic strip using all the elements of a narrative story. This is basically kind of like what the original lesson plan was, but instead of using Storybird, they would just do it on a piece of paper. And then the 8th one, students will write a bad example of a narrative story and then write a good example of a narrative story. So that shows that the students are able to differentiate between a bad narrative story and then a good one. Like when I say bad and good, I mean it involves all the elements, not really like subject wise, but just to see that the elements are there. And then the 9th one, students will use Travinity to take an interactive quiz on all the elements of a narrative story. And this is the one that I'm actually going to go into more. So we'll just click. All right. And this Travinity is a very easy to use website. It's basically like Kahoot, like all these resources basically are the same thing. They just kind of have different elements within them. So you can see there are public quizzes, which, basically anyone makes. It doesn't have to be about a certain thing or anything. See if it'll load up. Okay, let's just go to My Quizzes. Here we go, that worked. The public quizzes are just any random quiz. So you can see that I have this one already started, narrative writing. We can go into edit quiz. All right, and I already have the first question done. It's which of the following is not one of the elements of a narrative story? And then you write your answers and then you click the right question. They won't see that when they're taking it, but obviously there needs to be a correct answer, but they'll see it after the question's over. And when I say question's over, they have 25 seconds to answer, but you can change it to how little or long you want it. And then it also has a clue or a hint that you can add in there. You can also upload an image. So we can save the question, go on to the next one. New question. So something that we could say about narrative writing a question, which this is a bad question, but it still gets them thinking about which one it is, knowing the different parts of a res. Yeah, and then you would click that, and you could say enter clue. It's in the question, and then they can be like, oh yeah. So then you just save it, and then so let's see what it would be when we preview it. Yeah, so then this would be up on the screen, and then the students would have their phone up or tablet, and then they would answer that way. All right. So, all right, and then the ISTE standards that Travinity meets is Empowered Learner. I think all these resources meet these same standards because they're all very similar. They just have some different features to them. So it helps students become engaged with their learning, and it also helps them take an active role in their learning. So when the students have a fun game that they can play that also involves learning, they'll want to learn more about the topic so that they can place well in the game, especially if the kids are competitive and want to do well. And even if you add an incentive, if you get top 3, if you place top 3 when this is over, then you'll get extra credit. I know teachers use that when I was in high school, and that always made people want to win and think about what they learned. And then also it meets Computational Thinker, so the students can use the clues or hints given from the quiz to help them choose the right answer. And then this will help them be able to find hints or clues in other forms of assessments. So if they're taking like an actual test, they can look for clues or hints within the question to help them make the right answer. And then UDL checkpoints met. I think that Travinity meets basically all of Guideline 6, which are guides appropriate goal setting, supports planning and strategy development, facilitates managing information and resources, and enhances capacity for monitoring progress. So Travinity would help guide goal setting because the students are able to see which questions they got wrong or right. So they can be like, oh, I just need to work on facts about this part of a narrative writing element. And then they can go in and study on that element. And then it supports planning and strategy development, kind of the same thing with the goal setting. They can plan for what they need to study for, especially if you say, like you're the teacher and you say, some of this will be on the test, like for the Travinity quiz. And then they'll take those questions from the Travinity quiz and study those and take them to when they do the test. And then it facilitates managing information and resources. So yeah, they are just managing the information that they're getting from the quiz and taking it into other assessments. And then enhance capacity for monitoring progress. The students will be able to know if they're doing well or not based on the quiz game, and they will be able to know if they need to work on something, one part of it, or if they're just good and just kind of need an overview of what the lesson was.